The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone. I'm Michelle Hebert, SANE's Director of Communications, and I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar on credit recovery. SANE's is proud to present this webinar in cooperation with Castle Learning. As most of you know, Castle Learning is a core resource for supporting K-12 instruction and assessing student learning. The web-based tool benefits teachers, students, administrators, and parents. Presenting today is Scott Fisher, President of Castle Learning. Scott joined Castle Learning in 2001 to lead the company's early growth in the New York education market, and today Scott leads the Castle team of educational professionals in multiple states. And joining Scott online is SANE's own Karen Bronson, our Director of Professional Development. So before we get started, you may notice that looking at your control panel, all participants are muted during the presentation, but we'll have time for Q&A at the end. So if you have any questions, simply type that into your question box in the control panel. Today's session will also be recorded, and all registrants will receive a link to that recording, which will be archived on the SANE's website. So with that, I'll turn it over to Scott and Karen, and we'll get started.
Thanks, Michelle. I appreciate it. And thanks, everybody, for taking some time out of your busy schedule today in your lunch hour to spend a couple minutes talking about credit recovery and possibly a little different view of what we call recapturing credit. I'm also glad to have Karen Bronson on board to help me present this, and I may be reaching out to Karen as I go through this for some of her feedback and comments. I've got several slides. We're going to kind of go through this, say between somewhere 15 and 30 minutes, and we'll ask if there's any questions at the end. So I'm going to jump right in. And one of the first things I'd like to put out to the group is your current credit recovery plan working? And the reason I bring this up is I think it's really important that you take a look and evaluate your current plan, and is it really having the success that you, from either an administrator or an educator, the district or school want to see in that plan. And what I'd like to do is share a couple of real life experiences that I've had. In fact, one literally yesterday. I met with a high school principal here in New York, and he was sharing some of his experiences with his current credit recovery plan, which involves basically taking a student through a whole entire course over the summer. And he said it's really not meeting our objectives. We're not having a lot of luck with it. The fact that there's not any real clear guidelines from the state and how we do this, and we're just trying to push kids through and keeping it to a lower level, it's really not helping the student, and it's really not helping us. So he's starting to rethink about how he delivers his credit recovery plan within his school. I also had a chance not too long ago to sit in on a summer class at a suburban New York school district, and they brought the students in and they sat them down at computer terminals, and right in front of the computer terminals were a long length of windows, and it's summer out and the sun's shining, and we had a teacher that was in there that was not a certified teacher in this curriculum, but was there to monitor, make sure the students stayed in their chair, and the kids kind of looked out the window most of the time or were talking to their friends sitting next to them, and I didn't really see a lot getting done. And the reason I bring up these experiences that I've had is I want you to think about that plan, and is it really meeting your needs, and are you having success within your plan and evaluating it, and maybe it may need some tweaks and changes. So with that said, first of all, I think you need to take a look at how it's being implemented. You know, how are we doing that internally within the school or within the district? Are we having a success rate that we're happy with? And if we're not, what type of changes do we need to make? And what is the cost involved with that? If we're only having a 10% success rate and we're spending a lot of money, what's that cost as it relates to the success rate that we've got? So those are a couple things you might want to think about when you're taking a look at your current credit recovery and how it's working within your school or district. How is it being implemented? And I've seen all three of these in my past years. Some are being done during the school year. We see some that are strictly in a summer activity. or a combination of both. Some being done during the school year and then some in the summer. And the reason I kind of want you to take a look at that is, are we having more success during the school year as opposed to in the summer, or vice versa, or are we seeing the same kind of success rate in both the school year and a summer activity? So think about those as you take a look at your plan also. What I've typically seen, and more traditionally, is most schools have gone to some type of digital type resource that's taking a student from A to Z in that curriculum. So basically it's the full course, and then the students typically self-driving itself, so to speak, through that digital course to complete from A to Z. With that said, I'm not sure that we're getting the kind of results that we had anticipated we might see. So what I'm going to propose is moving on to the next step would be to possibly take a look at recapturing credit in small chunks. And what I'm trying to put on the table for everybody here in the meeting, our attendees today, is to think about this a little bit differently. If the blue areas that you see in this illustration are components where the student may have already received credit, but was only missing certain portions of it, and those yellow components that are on the illustration, maybe that's all we really need to concentrate on, and we can possibly get that student to recapture those credits that are missing throughout the school year and keep that student on pace. So with that said, let's take a look at how we can focus on only the missing credit, number one. Number two, we can keep that student on pace during the school year. We reduce the possible cost of additional resources needed, and we may be able to eliminate that summer enrollment. Karen, anything you might want to add to this?
Yeah, I think that it really is a timely topic. I think you hit it right on the head when you kind of shared the stories about, what you experienced recently in Buffalo and over the summer. Credit recovery is in the news a lot. It's certainly in the downstate papers a lot in terms of districts really getting criticized for the process being kind of referred to as kind of a joke, where kids are getting literally pushed through without much learning or real investment on their part. And I think that was exactly kind of what you shared, getting into the benefits of something that's more incremental and meaningful. So I think it would be interesting to see what we mean by success, or is it working? So it seems that perhaps school leaders may feel like this really isn't working, in the sense of kids really are not invested in it. It's working in terms of, okay, we get more kids through, but kind of at what cost? So I just think it's a very timely topic because, like I said, it's something that is actually making the news more and more frequently. And my only thought was, what attendees might have to say about how they would define success, or whether their current approach is working.
I think it's a good point, Karen, and I am seeing it in a lot of course, articles that are education oriented that I'm reading. It is a hot topic. So yeah, I'd be interested as we get to the end of this if some of the attendees would like to jump in and possibly give us some of the ideas of what they're doing in their respective school or districts. So thank you for that.
I was just going to ask you too, Scott, can you give us a little example of how what sounds like a much better approach, that incremental approach as the school year is in progress, what that might look like, what we mean by a unit of credit over the course of the school year while the school year is in progress? Do we mean perhaps something at the conclusion of a specific unit of study that involves some assessment? I was just wondering what that might look like, because once again, I'm not a person who's had a lot of direct experience with credit recovery professionally.
You're leading me right into where I'm going next.
Good.
So yeah, you're reading my mind. So let me jump into that as long as you brought it up.
Yeah.
One of the things that in thinking about this in smaller chunks, as Karen just mentioned, we want to take a look at possibly pre-designing a series of credit recovery activities that could be managed within the school or the district. And a couple of things we might want to, as we talk about that first bullet point there, create and managed by the school or district. Think about possibly taking a look at a credit recovery coordinator within your school or within your district, or maybe even a teacher that might be in special assignment. The coordinator would work with all the disciplines or possibly one in developing these activities and issuing to those students or monitoring the progress of the kids that fall into this for recapturing credit. The second bullet point there, using an existing resource, most districts have multiple resources that they've invested in. Is there something that we've already got dollars invested in that we can use as a tool to recapture some of these credits without having the need to go out and spend additional money from the budget? So think about how we can evaluate those resources already in our toolbox. And third, using technology is a great method for doing things like grading and progress monitoring, assessing student achievement. With some place in there, we can't put 100% of it on the technology. We have to have a certified educator involved in this process. And we need to think about how we can mix the technology, but not dependent on it 100% to lead that student into that credit recovery, or in this case, recapturing credit. Karen, any input on those three bullet points?
No, it's just starting to, make more sense to me in terms of designing what these more incremental pieces might look like. So
Now, let me be honest, as we talk about this first bullet point, there is a little bit of work up front on the school or the district side, but once that's done, it's really done in that initial year, and we have this plan and these created activities that are going to be able to carry over down the road. So it's not something we're going to have to keep needing to rebuild. We can tweak it along the way, but we don't have to rebuild it all the time.
How about that? Once again, this is not an area that I know much about at all. Is there any requirement that there be a certified educator involved in the process? Because I think that makes a significant difference, whether that's required or not. And how is that defined? Could it be a certified aide, for example?
That's a good question. I don't know that there is a clear defined expectation there, but that's something we may need to jump into and find out.
Yeah, you said earlier it was some of the language around it really wasn't that clear from the state. So that, I think, kind of adds to some of the questions that you've already articulated around the process itself.
Definitely. So
yeah.
Okay. So let's think about this. If we're going to develop something internally, and this is just a representation of what something might look like, and this could be done by a standard, could be done by a unit of study. I'm picking out, in this case, one by a unit of study more so than anything else, but we can do this by standard. There's a number of different ways you can do it. In this case, we would create internally with a resource that the district may have that they use already, a set of activities. And in this case, the student would take some type of pre-test activity to see if in that pre-test we could test that student out, meeting some type of mastery level that's set to earn credit right up front. Maybe the student's pretty good and fairly intelligent, and we don't have to put them through a whole full basket of activities. They can take that missing unit that they missed, take that pre-test. If they test out fairly well, we're done. We can give them credit. We've got enough data to be able to prove that they were successful, and we can move on. However, if the student doesn't test out well enough in that pre-test, then we need to go on to a set of additional instruction along with some practice activities. This is where that certified educator may have to come into play and take some additional instruction time, get the student possibly up that ladder, which would then lead them into a post-test. And hopefully at the time we get to the post-test, we at that point see some more success from the student. We also have a comparison that we can take a look at from the pre-test to the post-test, that there was some growth, and hopefully a acceptable level to issue credit for that student in the post-test. Karen, is this making a little bit more sense
Yep.
on your side?
Mm-hmm.
So this is where we start to develop these activities that are being done internally. So our staff in your respective districts or schools have some involvement in this and can say, look, and I'm comfortable as that certified educator that if this student can perform at a given level on these activities, then I'm comfortable that we can issue credit and we can track that student's progress. And the student is achieving at an acceptable level. So just to think about this, once we've got these activities done within that curriculum, we need to then identify the missing unit or standard for that individual student. We're then going to schedule that student for recapturing the credit that they're missing, either during the day, after school, on a weekend. I mean, I've seen all kinds of different methods done for this, and we can start to keep that student on a pace to get them through that course with possibly not having to go on a summer. Now, could this also be done in a summer type activity? I think it could. Instead of sitting the student down and needing them to go through the complete curriculum or the complete course, can we only have them focus on the areas that they missed during the school year? That's something that you also might want to consider. And with that said, what I'd like to do is, I know this is more of a seed planting that we were trying, Karen and I were trying to get out to our attendees today, thinking about it. I'd like to thank you again for giving up some of your lunch hour. I'd like to open it up, Michelle, if there's any questions from the attendees that we might be able to answer.
Well,
I know this is kind of quick, but again, I want to take their whole lunch hour either.
Yeah. I don't see any questions right now. Give it a second to see if anyone has follow-up or questions. Of course, you could follow up with Scott 121 also. You want to share some of your email or your phone number, Scott, in case anyone wants to jot that down?
Sure. If anybody would like to email me and get a little bit more detail on this, we can set up a time. My email address is my first initial S is in Scott, my last name Fisher, which is FISCHER at castlelearning.com. Feel free to email me directly, and I'd be more than willing to either have a virtual meeting, or maybe we could even set up an on-site meeting with your credit recovery team.
Okay, terrific. Karen,
Thanks, Scott.
I was going to say, Karen?
Just to clarify, so Scott, what you suggested was, so let's say it's a course like Earth Science, which the example might have been from, that you, Castle Learning would work with the district using assessments units that they already have to create those incremental units of study, benchmark pieces.
That's basically correct. So
Okay.
maybe taking a resource that they've already got in hand, be able to develop those activities. Most of their teachers are using some type of instructional aids when they're presenting that in the classroom, whether that be a video, a PowerPoint, a PDF document, that type of instructional piece that they could then attach to any one of those activities, primarily in between the pre and the post test, let's say, in those practice areas where we could use that. So, and for example, Karen, on our product, we have a tracking report. It's called Time on Task. So as a student may be doing this, let's say outside the classroom in most cases, we have some documentation that the student was on task, how much time was idle as they're going through this. So we can give some documentation back to that educator or administrator, not only the assessment part of it, but how much time they were on task. So.
Okay, very good.
We do have one question, Scott. The question is, does CASA Learning offer units or standards?
Both, actually. So if a group wanted to create it by the standard, they could do it and set it up the same exact way, or by the unit topic. So they can do it either way. And especially for those folks that might be attending today that already have CAS Learning, in the resource or to the toolbox, this is something that's already part of that package. So you're not spending any new money. That's one of the advantages of it. Can we do this without spending new dollars? I'd rather see you take those dollars and put them into your educators.
All right, well, I think that's it for today. So,
Okay, again, we were trying to keep this short. We didn't know how many questions we might have. So we really do appreciate your time and thinking about how we're doing credit recovery in your schools or your districts. And maybe there is some tweaks we can make to make it a little bit more effective. And I thank you for your time. And Michelle and Karen, thanks Annie's for giving us this opportunity to talk about it. So.
Thanks very much, Scott.
All right. Okay, that's it for today then. Bye-bye.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.